Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Wednesday, July 7th, 2021. On today's episode, we're going to have a spoiler-filled discussion about Loki, Episode 5, Journey into Mystery. This is Slash Film editorial director Peter Sciretta. Joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film weekend editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
So let's get into this. Well, actually, before we get into it, every episode of this, we get to your feedback from last week's episode, your theories. We go into our brief reactions. Then we get into the beat-by-beat breakdown and into the speculation about what's going to happen in future episodes in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. To be honest with you, a lot of the emails that we received this week were kind of answered in this week's episode. I did get a tweet from Paul Toms, and he did say, "Hey, Peter, regarding the pen in Loki, my money is on Mobius being a teacher at the school before he was taken by the TVA. The name of the school is triggering an old, distant memory. Maybe he's sitting at a desk reading a jet ski magazine while he's taken." What do you think of that theory, Brad?
I think we talked about the pen potentially being something from his past once we learned that all the TVA agents were variants. So, yeah, I think that's a possibility.
Yeah, I could see him at the end being, well, that'd be a boring end for him, right? To be back at his, like, a school teacher. I don't know. I don't know how you show that is the problem. Someone else wrote in, Zach wrote in asking what we thought of the mid-credits scene from last week in terms of, was it smart to include that, or would it have been cooler to save the reveal of the, this other, the void for the next week? Like, was it worth that, like, credit sequence? What do you think?
Yeah, I thought about that too, because it almost would have been more fun for them to let us, like, sit, for a week thinking that Loki had died. I'm sure we probably would have come to the conclusion that he probably isn't, because there's no way they're going to kill off the main character in his own show, like that before the end of the series. So, I mean, but it would have been an interesting approach. But I wonder if Marvel knew that maybe introducing that would allow some time for it to, like, settle and maybe get some, like, information out there as to, like, what's going on, and maybe for people to, like, get used to it before they sent them on, an even wilder chase, I guess, in this episode.
Yeah, wild is putting it mildly. No, I think, I don't know. At first, when this question came in, I was thinking to myself, I had the same thought that you did, Brad. But then I was like, you know what? There would probably be a lot of people that be angry, thinking, that things were left one way. It would be kind of gimmicky. It'd be like a cliffhanger. Do you know what I mean? Like the traditional cliffhanger where the car goes off the cliff, and then you find out in the next week's episode that the guy jumped out of the car as it was coming off the cliff, and you didn't see that. It's kind of like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's our thoughts on that. But let's get into brief thoughts on the episode. Brad, what do you think about episode 5?
I gotta say, this show just keeps getting better and weirder and cooler, and it really is, like, just becoming my favorite Marvel series, and probably just one of my favorite things Marvel has done in general, surpassing even a huge chunk of the movies, and how great this is. It's just such a cool dive into the weirder side of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's just creating a lot of interesting questions and presumably connections to what's to come in the next phase of movies and shows. So it's just awesome. This episode is so cool.
Yeah, I wonder where this would place for me if I had to put, like, the TV shows and the movies and rank them, because this would be very high. Like, I'm really, really enjoying this, and I love how so delightfully weird it is. And I really hope that if Marvel gets anything out of the fan response to the show, I hope they see how ready we are for these kind of really strange and weird things.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I like about Guardians of the Galaxy. I like that what they're doing here too, and having this group of misfits, misfit variant Lokis was fun to live in this void of a world for an episode. And where it goes next, I don't know. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I really dug this. And again, the music, amazing. Everything amazing. I don't know. I'm just really loving this show. So yeah. I don't even have a criticism for this episode. But okay, so this week's episode is titled Journey into the Mystery. And that is the title of the comic book series that Loki made his first appearance. It was Journey into Mystery 85, which was published in October of 1962, and was also the first appearance of some guy named Thor. Not sure if I've ever heard of him. And okay, so we're getting into the breakdown. This episode begins with this sweeping tracking shot through the TVA, and it's being done while the camera is rotating from upside down to right side up, and it gives you this like very disorientating feeling. What do you think is trying to be done with this choice? Just that like things are being flipped upside down, kind of.
Yeah, I mean it's a stylistic choice that kind of fits in with the overall vibe of the show so far, and just how they're kind of just turning things on their head, really kind of turning our perception of the Marvel universe and even the TVA during the series upside down. And the way it kind of like moves from one shot to the next is pretty cool too, because it matches like angles and shapes up before it makes the transition to a new shot, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And then we get this wonderful drone shot that takes us through the destroyed cityscape of this pocket universe, or whatever you want to call it. I guess they're going to call it the Void here, so we'll call it the Void. And here's where I want to give the shout out to Natalie Holt's music. I feel like in this opening sequence, I was just like rocking out. I want to get the soundtrack for this, which I think, did it come out this week or it comes out next week? It's coming. It's either out or it's coming out very soon. So interestingly, here in the cityscape, last week we saw, in the end credit scene, we saw the variant Lokis standing over our prime Loki, and we saw in the background there was Avengers Tower, like it was in ruins of this like cityscape. But here in a shot, we do get Avengers Tower. But it doesn't say Avengers. It doesn't say Stark on it. It says something else. It says QENG. What is that, Brad?
So that's a reference to Marvel Comics, a company called Kang Enterprises.
Kang. I think we've talked about him before.
We have, but this actually doesn't have any ties to Kang the Conqueror. It's just kind of a little Marvel Easter egg. It's the company that buys Avengers Tower from Stark Industries in Avengers Ultron Forever issue number 1. And the villainous character in it is a CEO named Mr. Gryphon, and he engages in some nefarious activities involving the Marvel characters. But nothing tied to Kang the Conqueror, despite the sound. But maybe because it sounds like Kang, that's why it's in there. We'll find out.
Interesting. Okay, so Old Man Loki informs us that we are in the Void, and this big cloud creature behind them is named Goliath, I guess is how it's pronounced. Mm-hmm. And how cool is it that we, like, for this episode, we have an antagonist that is this like this cloud. We've gotten the smoke monster, the lost smoke monster in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I kind of love it. So Goliath is a character from the comics, believe it or not. In the comics, he was the first being to break free of the restraints of time itself. So very fitting to be in this story. And I'm not sure if you knew this, Brad, but he's the only creature in all of existence that someone named Kang is afraid of. Indeed.
Yeah, this in the comics, Goliath is a temporal being, feeds on temporal energy and whatnot, and creates an empire 2 to 3 times bigger than the one that Kang the Conqueror creates. And so they're arch rivals, and there's only one other way to stop Goliath other than Kang the Conqueror, who built a barrier around his city until it was accidentally destroyed by Ravonna Renslayer, this whole comic story. And so it's certainly interesting that we're getting a character with direct ties to Kang the Conqueror, especially considering what happens at the end of this episode.
Yeah. Sylvie has Renslayer captive, but before killing her, the judge tells her that Loki is still alive. She claims that she also wants to know who is at the top of this, who lied to her. I'm not sure how I feel about this, Brad. Okay, I said I didn't have any criticisms of this episode. Maybe I do. I'm not sure if I'm liking the acting here from Gugu, and maybe it's supposed to be so intentionally bad that we're supposed to seem obvious that we shouldn't believe her. But I don't know. I'm just not liking her in this episode. And I also don't know how we're supposed to feel about her. Are we supposed to believe her at this moment? Does she really want to know who's in charge of this, or does she already know? What do you think?
I didn't think her performance was bad. If anything, I just think that her character is desperate and she's doing what she has to survive, potentially stop Sylvie from doing whatever she's going to do next. I don't think she knows what's going on with the TVA. If she does, it's a complicated front she's putting on, which I guess, maybe she is, since she has been doing that for at least partially for a little while now by lying to some people about the TVA and the people working in it. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, last week we were theorizing about the batons, like those things that they use to what is the word? I'm forgetting it. Not erase. What was it? Prune. Yes, prune is the word. The things that they use to prune people, and we were wondering, we all theorized that it probably sent them to this other pocket universe of sorts, and we were wondering, do the Minutemen know that? And I think it's pretty clear in this episode that the Minutemen don't know that, but she confirms that she does know this, because she says, she explains to Sylvie that when they prune a branched reality, it's impossible to destroy all the matter, so it's moved to a place on the timeline where it can't continue growing, a void at the end of time. So yeah, I think you're right, Brad. She knows more than we thought she did. I'm just wondering, how much more does she know? You don't think that she knows who's in charge of the TVA? You think that she actually thought the timekeepers were real?
Yeah, I think that she bought into it.
Yeah, no, I think you're probably right. Sylvie reluctantly gives Ravonna back her tempad, and back into the void we go. We see a bunch of crazy things, and there's so many crazy things in the background of every one of these shots. I'll bring up some of them, but it's impossible to bring up all of them. But I feel like people are going to be looking at this show and freeze framing it and zooming in for the next couple of weeks and still finding stuff. So we see a dilapidated pirate ship, maybe, or maybe it's just a 1700s ship in the middle of this field. Brad, does that have anything to do with anything, or is it just...
There wasn't any specific identifying markers. Yeah. I just think it's one of those cool visuals you see in these kind of desolate landscapes where things are out of time and have been decaying there for a while. It's just weird to see boats like that in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and also especially when it's juxtaposed right in front of this classic looking saucer shaped UFO.
Yeah.
Yeah, which again, I don't think has reference to anything. There's a satellite sticking out of the ground, or I think it's a satellite. There's a bunch of stuff. We'll get to some of the more Easter eggy stuff later, but I don't know. I just love how in the background of every one of these shots there's something to be what's that? Loki argues with a group of the variant Lokis about their lack of a plan. They are just trying to survive, and the void is where they're just trying to survive in this void, but Loki wants out. And the variants explain that the monster in the sky destroys almost everything sent to the void. He's kind of like a trash compactor of sorts, I guess. But the Lokis have survived because that's what they do. They have access to no tempads. They're unable to cause a Nexus event. There is no way out. And we find out that Kid Loki, his Nexus event was that he actually killed Thor. And Loki looks worried when he finds this out. Why do you think he looks worried?
I'm not sure that he looks worried as so much as I think he's impressed and also like just kind of shocked.
Yeah. And it's weird that if you had asked me last week, like who's the leader of this group, I wouldn't have thought that the Kid Loki was the leader.
Yeah, Kid Loki is a badass in the comics too. So
yeah. Later we see them sneaking across the train, and they make their way by this yellow helicopter that says Thanos on the side of it. And I think this is my favorite Easter egg in the episode. Brad, you wrote this up in your Easter eggs, right?
Yeah, I wrote up in the Easter eggs, and there's a whole separate article that dives into this very silly Easter egg that references one of the goofiest things in Marvel Comics history and now makes it canon in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
So in one of the multiverses, Thanos was flying this yellow helicopter that said Thanos on the side of it.
Yep.
It kind of reminds me of like the old Adam West Batman, like how he would have like the Batcopter and it would like say Batcopter on the side of it or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. We also see a giant version of Yellow Jacket's head from the first Ant-Man movie.
So, yeah, I mean, this isn't exactly the same as Ant-Man's helmet in the movies. I went and looked to compare. It does have similarities.
You're talking about Yellow Jacket, right?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Yellow Jacket.
Okay.
And so it's not the same as it appears in the first Ant-Man movie, but it does like kind of resemble, you know, what could be his hardware. So maybe it's like an alternate Yellow Jacket that was like able to grow like Ant-Man instead of only being able to shrink.
It seems like a very specific reference to put in there, even if it's different. So last time we saw Yellow Jacket was in that original Ant-Man movie, and did he die? He got sent somewhere or something? Like
he imploded upon himself, and so could have survived, you know. And since this is also a place where you know, variants have been reset and timelines have been reset, it could be a Yellow Jacket from any number of timelines. Yeah,
I know we've been theorizing this whole time about how this could connect in with Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. Didn't Evangeline Lilly accidentally tweet or Instagram something saying that Corey Stoll was in that movie, even though he has not been announced?
Yeah, when she posted an Instagram story about training for the movie before production started, and she included a hashtag of Corey Stoll's name, and then that post was very promptly taken down.
So, Brad, I know you see where I'm going with this. Do you think that this connects any way besides a fun Easter egg?
I think it's. I mean, anything is possible at this point. Like, considering what the multiverse is going to do to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like literally anything is possible. I can't rule out seeing any version of any character or seeing any dead characters return. Like, anything is on the table, and this makes more sense than some of the crazier ideas. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some version of Yellow Jacket returning in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania.
Yeah. Remember that time that I put out there that Loki had the time stone and was rewinding time on Lamentus? that was a ridiculous theory. Anyways, okay. They open the hatch in the ground and get in. This is the hideout. The camera sinks through the dirt, and we see lots of objects in the ground, including a lunch tray, which I don't know what that has to do with anything. Thor's hammer. And then we see a tiny frog Thor in a jar. And this is a reference to the comics, right?
Yeah, there's actually two different versions of Frog Thor, or Throg, as he's known. There's one that's Thor that is turned into a frog by Loki. And then there's another one where there's a character who is a football player, and he loses his wife and daughter, and he gets really depressed, and he goes to see a witch so that he can see his wife and daughter one more time. But he's not able to repay the debt to her, and so he gets turned into a frog who gets caught up in like this adventure with like other frogs in Central Park, and ends up meeting Frog Thor during this like war between alligators and rats in the sewers of New York. And then after Frog Thor leaves, he with like Mjolnir, a shard of Mjolnir gets left behind, and he's able to fashion it into a new small Mjolnir, and then that version of Throg is born in the Marvel Comics universe as well.
Yeah. And by the way, this jar has the written on it T365, which is the number of the issue, Thor 365, where that second one that you mentioned. And by the way, that the cover of that comic is from 1986. It says, quote, possibly the most unusual Thor story ever published.
For sure.
Also, the other Frog Thor thing that you mentioned, where Loki turned his brother into a frog, they made a joke about that in Thor Ragnarok. So that has been Marvel Cinematic Universe canon for some time. But yeah, this seems to be the second of the two that you mentioned. Strangely, this character, like Throg, people like this character. And he's become kind of a fan favorite and has appeared in like more comics and cartoons and video games. So yeah, I doubt we're going to see more of him in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Well, could they end up doing like they were doing like those Pet Avengers comics, right? Could they end up doing like a Disney Plus Pet Avengers series?
What is there a Pet Avengers series? I thought that was a DC thing.
I think it's
the Ultimate Marvel.
Yeah, Pet Avengers. It was a 4-issue series.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, it had I think that's where he first appeared with that. Like, used the sliver of Thor's hammer. I could be wrong. Anyways, so they're in this bunker, which looks like it was an old like 50s bowling alley, which has been kind of covered and hidden underneath the ground, and it's covered in various objects, including a candy cane throne, which is Kid Loki's throne, and there's some interesting objects in here. There is the polybus, or is that how you say it? Polybus? I think it is. Arcade machine?
Maybe polybias?
Pious? I've never said it out loud. I've only seen it like I've seen it in The Simpsons. Like, it's referenced a lot. Did you write this up in your Easter eggs?
I did.
Do you want to tell us about this arcade machine?
Sure. Yeah, it's actually not a real arcade machine. It's based on this urban legend.
Well, we don't know.
Oh, gee. Okay, sure. We don't know. There's this urban legend that in the 1980s there was this small run of polybias arcade machines that appeared in Portland, Oregon in 1981. And it's said that it was a part of a government-run crowdsourced psychology experiment that was meant to produce intense psychoactive and addictive effects in the player. It's obvious why this is an urban legend. It's said that at times the Men in Black visited these machines to collect data from them about the people who use them and stuff. So clearly very ridiculous things. Yeah. So, but a really fun like conspiracy theory reference here.
Yeah, Brad, there's also reports that some kids got nightmares from it. Some developed amnesia.
Ah, wow.
But yeah, there's no proof it ever existed, but there are like, you can find like old like Usenet like postings about it and stuff like that. But it's like one of those things, like the series has a lot of those kind of things stuck in it. Like, what was that in the first episode he hijacked the plane?
Oh, the DB Cooper.
DB Cooper, yeah. So I think he likes to stick like these kind of, not that that's an urban legend, that's actually something that happened, but it's like kind of mysterious.
Yeah, so I think something that couldn't be explained.
Yeah. Renslayer asks Miss Minutes to pull up the restricted files about the beginning of time and the creation of the TVA. But Sylvia is more interested in seeing the end of the time, which Ravonna says is just a void. Sylvie wonders aloud if there might be something beyond that. Using the same logic of her hiding in apocalypses, someone, say the timekeepers, could be completely undetectable, hiding out at the end of time. So Ravonna thinks that she might be right, and there's no way to get there. Sylvia is like threatens to kill Ravonna, and before she can do that, Miss Minutes brings up that they have a prototype Void spacecraft. But it's immediately clear that they're just stalling until the Minutemen reach the chambers, which they do. And so I'm I'm not sure if Sylvie even like knows for sure, but she mentions for a second time there that she almost believed her, and maybe there was some truth in the deception there. Like, so, Brad, I'm wondering, do you like? It's very unclear to me what Ravonna's motives are here. Like, does she not know the truth? I guess you're saying that she doesn't know the truth, but does she want to know the truth? Because she's definitely protecting the TVA. She doesn't want to see it burn in the way Mobius does.
Yeah, for sure. I think that she's simultaneously wondering what's going on, but also concerned about maintaining what she's been trying to, do with her life, for however long now.
Yeah. And because Sylvie brings that up and says that there might be some truth in the deception of her, like wanting to find out the truth, I feel like when you have a main character say that out loud, that's probably the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Sylvie prunes herself, goes to the void with Ravonna's tempad. And it's also interesting here that the Minutemen, that Ravonna has to like pretend in this moment that like Sylvie has killed herself, because the Minutemen agents don't know that you go to the void. Like she has to like keep her cool, that like, because Sylvie has her tempad, is going to the void, and like that's all bad for her, but she can't, like, she has to keep her cool in front of the Minutemen because she wants them to believe that Sylvie's dead.
Yeah.
Back in the Loki variant hideout, we have Old Loki pouring box wine into the alligator Loki's mouth, and this is a box of rock swan. It's from that still Roxxon Corporation. And by the way, one of the things we're going to feature in the feedback section that we don't need to feature anymore, there's like so many articles about like, is alligator Loki or is it crocodile Loki? I think we said crocodile last week. So there was like all sorts of articles. They went to experts. There's videos, but we now know it's alligator Loki. So Thor Loki claims to have vanquished Iron Man and Captain America and claimed his prize of all 6 Infinity Stones. Alligator Loki calls him a liar. Turns out Alligator Loki caused a Nexus event by eating the wrong neighbor's cat. And Loki really wants to know what happened with Old Loki, as he knows Thanos is supposed to kill him after the events of Thor Ragnarok. So Old Loki explains what happened, that like everything happened the way it was supposed to happen until the point where he cast a projection of himself. So even Thanos believed it was real, and Thanos killed the projection, and the real Loki hid like as inanimate debris. And he realized that everywhere he went, only pain followed. So he removed himself from the equation and hid on a remote planet in isolation and solitude. There's something interesting here. I remember when was that from Infinity War where Loki dies?
Yes. When
that movie came out, there was all these like internet theories that Loki didn't actually die, and that he was just using a projection of himself, because there's like these YouTube videos and these like screenshots, and people claim to see Loki's head in the debris in the background. So it's kind of funny that this is like I think a reference to those fan theories. But okay, so he got lonely. He missed his brother. The moment he took his first steps of getting off the island, the TVA showed up and captured him. He makes a toast to the god of outcasts, and we see Kid Loki drinking out of what, Brad?
Ecto Cooler.
Yes. Wow, another Ghostbuster connection. Do you want to tell everybody what High C Ecto Cooler is, or do you think everybody knows?
I mean, I hope everybody knows. If you don't, there was a glorious time in the late 80s and through the 90s where there was a High C juice box called Ecto Cooler, inspired by Ghostbusters. It returned in 2016 when Ghostbusters Answer the Call was released. They put out new juice boxes and they put it in cans, but it's gone again. So now all we can do is hope that it comes back when Ghostbusters Afterlife arrives in theaters later this year.
Yeah, it was just like this drink called Citrus Cooler that they had been selling since 1965. But when real Ghostbusters came out, they wanted to like tie it to that. So they dyed it green. And it was supposed to only last until like the end of that show, but it ended up lasting for like over a decade after that show went off there. But this is the reason why I bring this up is because we've been chronicling all the limited time beverages that have been in the show. Mm-hmm. So I think that's like a thing. I'd love to ask after the show is over. I'd like to ask the showrunner the reason for the limited time beverages. I think I'm the only one who's really interested in this, but I keep on noticing them. Loki is not willing to sit there and merely survive. He wants to escape. His plan is to kill Goliath, and he wants the Loki variants to help him, which they think is hilarious. Loki undoes the hatch, finds a half dozen Lokis staring back at him from above. The leader is wearing a presidential campaign button, and also the vote Loki thing, isn't that from the comics too?
Which thing?
The like Loki, I think recently in the comics in the last like 5 years or so, Loki like ran for president.
Oh yeah. That was a big storyline in one of the Marvel Comics runs.
Yeah, I think like the whole thing was that he was like, you know, all candidates lie, and he ran on a campaign of that he was going to be truthful and saying he was going to lie, and then he was going to lie. And I think like his slogan was believe, but in the middle of believe was bolded the word lie. Mm-hmm. So yeah. Okay, here's another criticism. I'll pull out another criticism of this episode. I'm kind of disappointed how this extra gang of Lokis is really not that fun. Aside from the presidential Loki, there isn't really. There's kind of like a generic group of marauders, and they don't really play up the fun variant versions of Loki in the way that the other Lokis that we just met do. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I was kind of hoping to see some other prominent Lokis among this crowd and get some just little interesting tidbits about them. And it's still kind of fun if you like take a closer look at their costumes and stuff like that, what kind of different Lokis there are. Like there's one who's kind of like a daredevil Loki wearing like a motorcycle helmet with like handlebars sticking out of it. And so like there's cool variants within there, but like I think it would have been even cooler if they were able to get like, you know, some random famous faces to jump in and do it just for the hell of it. But I imagine that's also pretty expensive and time consuming. Yeah, especially for a TV show. That was this shot before the pandemic or during the pandemic? I would imagine it was probably shot before the pandemic.
Oh, really? Okay.
But I don't know for sure. I could be totally wrong.
Yeah. Well, Sylvie wakes up in the void. She tries to enchant the monster, and here we get a vision of this like castle-like mansion that we end up seeing later. Sylvie runs for it. We see the Golden Gate Bridge in the background, like in ruins on the hills there. Brad, is it possible that this is a reference to X-Men: The Last Stand?
I sincerely doubt it, but it's, you know, who knows?
Okay, probably not. I thought that was probably a far reach, but so a car with a pizza slice pulls up and Sylvie jumps in, not even thinking who's in the driver's seat. It's Mobius. He's the getaway driver. He apologizes for hunting her all those years. They make up really fast. President Loki and his army go head to head with the original Loki variant group. Alligator Loki rips off President Loki's hand, which is a funny moment. A big fight breaks out, and it's fun to see the like various Lokis using their powers against each other. What did you think of this whole action sequence?
Yeah, it's a fun little sequence.
Yeah. Old Loki creates a portal, and him, Prime Loki, and Kid Loki, and Alligator Loki escape. Old Loki says that every version of Loki is broken, and Kid Loki says that whenever one of us dares to try to fix themselves, they're sent to the void. Loki believes that nothing can change until the TVA is stopped. Why do you think I think my opinion where this is headed is kind of changing in this episode, Brad. Why do you think the TVA is so opposed to Loki changing?
That's a good question. I feel like if Loki isn't doing what he's supposed to be doing, then there's nothing, maybe potentially nothing for the TVA to do, because it seems like Lokis are the ones probably causing the most mischief and creating new branches in the timeline and variation. But I also think that there's something to be said about a Loki that also breaks free from like what they're supposed to be doing and potentially risks taking away their control of time. Because if Loki's not doing what he's supposed to be doing, then he's even more unpredictable than you otherwise would imagine.
Okay, you're going in other directions as me, but we'll get to my direction a little bit later.
Okay.
So the Kid Loki has this way of telling where things are going to appear in the void, and they go and they find this massive naval ship. It's the USS Eldridge, which falls out of the sky. Do you have the backstory on this?
Yeah, this is another one of those fun conspiracy theory kind of things. It's said that some people believe that the USS Eldridge was part of this big military project called the Philadelphia Experiment, where they were trying to render a naval ship invisible or cloaked to enemy devices. And so there's a whole story about that project, which is said to apparently never exist, but who knows? And so this kind of proposes that, when the ship did disappear, this is why it did.
Yeah. And the person who actually, I think, started this story actually came out and said it was a hoax. Or maybe the government made him say that.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, you can look that up. There's even a movie, right? The Philadelphia Experiment, I think. Is that a time travel movie? I've never seen it.
I don't know.
Oh, okay. So we both haven't seen it. Loki's plan is to let Goliath take on the vessel as the variant Lokis take it from behind, but that doesn't work out too well. And also worth noting that the ship fires all its weapons it has against Goliath, and because it eats matter and energy, it's not hurt in any bit. So I think that proves that Loki's plan was bad, and thankfully Sylvie shows up. She's appalled at Loki's plan. She thinks whoever is responsible for the TVA is at the void at the end of time, and Goliath is just their guard dog. So she plans to enchant it to get past it. Now, here's I guess, here's a bit. I said there was no critical things here, but this is like another critical thing. Let me get this straight, Brad. So the timekeepers, or whoever behind this, behind the TVA, is sending the most problematic entities in the timeline to their front door? Doesn't that seem bad logistically?
I mean, yes, but I'm sure that they're thinking that Goliath cannot so easily be compromised.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's a pretty powerful watchdog that you have there to keep people from discovering what's in there, and probably a very few limited amount of people would be able to do something like that, which is again perhaps why the TVA has been so obsessed with stopping variant Lokis.
Yeah. Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer, Brad. Ravonna talks to Hunter B-15, who has been locked inside the secret cell inside the wall. And B-15 argues that the people need to know the truth. And Ravonna says that no, the TVA needs stability. And the fact that the timekeepers aren't real changes nothing. So Ravonna wants to find out information about Sylvie since she linked up with her. B-15 says that Sylvie wants revenge and will probably be searching for whoever created the fake timekeepers. Which is, I don't know, this whole interaction is weird because I feel like she doesn't tell Ravonna anything that she doesn't already know. But B-15 realizes that this isn't just about trying to protect the TVA, but that Ravonna just wants to find whoever is behind this all, but she won't find them before Sylvie because, quote, she only wants it while Sylvie needs it. What do you think of that, Brad?
I mean, it's been her whole driving force since she was a little girl. So yeah, it's just accurate.
So Ravonna asked Miss Minutes for all the files on the founding of the TVA. I don't know. Like, I feel like if I was in Renslayer's position, I would have already gone through all those files years ago. At this point, like, what do you think she's hoping to find?
I mean, whatever she doesn't know, you know, I'm sure she had no reason to question anything until now, and so now she's curious.
Yeah, true. Okay, so back into the void, Mobius proposes that Alligator Loki isn't really an alligator, or isn't really a Loki. He is a real alligator, and he's lying. But Old Loki points out that he's green, so that must mean he's a Loki. I think this is hilarious. And then Mobius says that it's always but the long con with Lokis. There's always a game within the game, which kind of reminds me of the Timekeepers, Brad. Like, it, in this void, and then there's this mansion behind this smoke monster, and there was this old Loki who he kind of found himself like solace in like this place where no one else was. It kind of reminds me of like a mansion in the middle of nowhere. Not saying he's there, but all this like seems like it's there for a reason, and it's not just like there for fluff. So I guess what I'm proposing, Brad, could the bad guy be some kind of variant Loki?
It's not out of the realm of possibility, but I think at this point now it would be the most boring choice for them to do, because they've already done so many weird things that the final villain being a Loki variant is too predictable. It's something that we had already talked about in previous episodes. We were even thinking that Richard E. Grant was going to be Old Man Loki and pulling the strings. So I just don't think that that's interesting enough for that to be the end game here.
I guess I also said that because that's why I brought up earlier, like, why is the TVA so invested in Loki not changing? Maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe another Loki would not want them to change. I don't know. Just some thoughts. I don't know anything. So outside is cold. Loki conjures up a blanket for him and Sylvie. They like kind of have this moment. Sylvie asks how she knows that Loki won't betray her in the final moments. Loki basically admits his past and says he's changed and won't let her down. They talk about what they would do when this is all over, and Loki proposes that they could figure it out together. Last week I mentioned the showrunner said that there was not going to be any romance here, Brad, but it certainly looks romantic with them underneath the same blanket together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. I think when Kate Herron was talking about that she probably just means like full on romance, because
no kiss.
Like it's not going to be that kind of romance. I think there's still love there, but maybe just not like the generic romance kind of love.
And is it just me, or like usually when you have characters talking on screen about like what they're going to do at the end, they don't get to do that because one of them dies or both of them dies?
Yes,
right.
That's true.
So that's what I'm feeling here when I watch this scene. I'm not feeling like, oh, I can't wait for them to get together at the end of time. I'm feeling like, oh no, that's not good. There's these little bird creatures. They almost look like peacocks with the back feathers, and they have like this head that's like this levitating ball.
Yeah, it's super weird.
Yeah, I don't know why they're there, but I like them. And the group looks out at the field, and we see the ship from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
That is the Dark Aster. That's the ship that Ronan had in Guardians of the Galaxy. I guess it's technically a ship owned by Thanos. I don't know. Sylvie is going to attempt to enchant Goliath and gives Loki the tempad, but he's not going to leave without her. So Mobius is heading back to the TVA to burn it all down, which is a reference to what Loki said in, I think, one of the first episodes. They share a bro hug, and it's a good moment. And all the other Lokis decide to stay in the void. It's become their home. Kid Loki conjures a golden short sword for Loki. And with that, Sylvie and Loki head towards the smoke monster. And so Eliath kind of looks like a bear in smoke form. And by the way, if you watch this show with the descriptive audio, it actually says that. So if you want to know what Eliath looks like a bear. I saw some people online describing him as a wolf.
A smoky bear.
Yeah, smoky. God. Good one, Brad. Good one. Loki draws the sword and flames come out of it. Is this a sword we've ever seen in the comics? Do you know?
Oh no, I'm not sure about actually. I would imagine it might be one of like Kid Loki's trademark weapons or something like that. But yeah, I actually don't know that. Yeah, so Eliath almost eats them, but gets distracted by something, a projection of the kingdom of Asgard as created by Old Loki. Earlier in the episode, Old Loki was talking about the daggers and how all the other variant Lokis were saying how they look super cool. And Old Loki was saying how they hurt Loki's ability to develop their magic into higher levels. And here Sylvie wonders how he's doing that. And Loki says, I think we are stronger than we realize. So Sylvie and Loki together attempt to enchant Eliath. The illusion of Asgard basically falls as Loki loses his focus. As the monster bears down on him, he laughs maniacally. Eliath leaves nothing but his horns. So is Old Loki dead? I think we agree he's dead, right? I would say so.
Yeah. I kind of wonder, like, while Old Loki was away on his island of planet, wherever he was, do you think he, like, created that illusion of Asgard to feel, like, less lonely?
That's an interesting question. I wouldn't put it past him if it was, something to give him a little comfort.
I don't know. I was thinking that. It didn't seem like something that he has, like, it didn't seem like the first time he's created Asgard. So I was like, why would he have done that before? And that was the only thing I could come up with. Anyways, okay. So finally, Eliath dissolves into the air as this like emerald cloud parts ways to reveal this huge mansion / castle in the distance on top of like this rock formation. And there's this white streak going across the background that kind of looks like if you remember that Missed Minutes animation where it had like the sacred timeline as like this white flowing streak, it almost looks like that. And no credit sequence. Were you surprised that there was no credit sequence?
No, I mean we're heading into the finale, and the end was a pretty shocking thing to begin with. So I think it makes sense to just save everything for the final episode.
So before we get into speculation, any final thoughts on this episode?
No, I think we pretty much, dug into all that stuff. The speculation is where the interesting stuff is now. Yeah. Okay. So, Brad, what is this mansion? Or is it a mansion or is it a castle or what would you call it? It looks like a mansion. I'm not entirely sure what that tower sticking out of it is with that glow, gold glow, there. So that's an interesting detail. Maybe it's Professor X's mansion? No, I'm just kidding. No, Peter. So, I don't know. Like, okay, so originally it was explained that the Timekeepers were transforming the place at the end of time into utopia. Now we've definitely found that that's not true. It's just like some old man's mansion or something. Who do you think the main villain's who do you think we're gonna find? And like, what is this last episode even gonna be, Brad? Because they're at this mansion at the end of time. Like, is it like the whole episode gonna be this battle between them and whoever's in there? Like, how is it gonna work? It has to be, I mean, there has to be a good amount of exposition here of talking to this person and finding out what's been going on with the Time Variance Authority, why things are the way they are, and just all of that stuff. Like they have to get answers to those questions, before all is said and done. As for who's there, the prevailing theory that still works, especially now with that Alioth has been brought into the fray, is Kang the Conqueror. It's, it would be a different spin on his, comic mythology, but there are so many things here, like about his comic history, that just makes sense to have him be part of this. There's actually even a storyline in Marvel Comics where he turns himself into like kind of a different being. Like he essentially is reborn as a character named Immortus, and this comes after he's tired of trying to control time and sick of like trying to keep up with supremacy. He's lost his son and his wife several times across different timelines, and so he decides to just give it up, and he takes an offer from the timekeepers to become somebody who, rather than conquering timelines, preserves them. And so that's something that could easily tie into what's going on here. There's another interesting angle here that we haven't talked about at all, and it could be interesting, and that's Baron Mordo, a character that we haven't seen since the end of Doctor Strange. And the reason I say that...
Wait. Can you recap who that is?
So this is the character that Chiwetel Ejiofor played in Doctor Strange. He's originally a hero working alongside Doctor Strange, teaches him, how to master his mystical powers along with the Ancient One. And he's there in the final battle. He's very concerned with, how magic is used, isn't necessarily sold on using the Time Stone to turn back time to help stop Caecilius in Doctor Strange. And he kind of feels betrayed by the Ancient One when all is said and done at the end of the movie. And in the credits scene, we see him taking away some of the power that this formerly disabled guy was using to allow him to walk again. And he's very specifically says that there's too many sorcerers in the world. And so we haven't seen him since then. And strangely enough, when you look at the mansion in this final shot, the cosmic waves that are behind it look a lot like the Dark Dimension from the end of Doctor Strange. Now, that's where Dormammu was. And the Dark Dimension is also a place that exists outside of the normal flow of time. So I think it would be interesting if that was something that came up, and it would also serve as a perfect setup for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, because Chiwetel Ejiofor is slated to return as Baron Mordo in that sequel as well. Yeah,
and that movie was also written by the same person who wrote this show, right?
Indeed, yep.
So, as Jeff Loeb would once say, it's all connected. Yeah, I had not heard that theory. That's interesting. I really, there's a lot that this last episode needs to accomplish. I'm so sad that this series is only 6 episodes, because I'm thinking about it. Not only do you have to explain the villain's motivation, why they created the TVA, but you got to solve what, does the TVA still exist after this? Do you restore all those people to their previous timelines? Well, their previous timelines don't even exist anymore, right? They were pruned. Right. So what happens to them? So I don't even think Owen Wilson could go back to being a teacher if that was what he was.
At least not in his own timeline.
Yeah. So I don't know. It just has a lot. There's a lot of prologue, I think, that needs to be here, unless this isn't just one season. But it feels like it's coming to a head. That I don't think it could continue. But I mean, would there be a reason to keep the TVA around after this?
Probably not.
Yeah, I would say probably not. I don't know. It'll be interesting. But yeah, so that'll be next week. And we will be back then to give our recap, our thoughts. If you have any thoughts, any theories, well, actually, I mean, you can email them to us at peter@slashfilm.com. But next week's going to be our last episode of this podcast. So if it's something that's actually solved in the episode, we might not read it on the air. You can find more of all of our work at slashfilm.com. You can find this podcast on Apple, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please rate and read this podcast in Apple Podcasts. Tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you tomorrow.